It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's discussion about APEC and the future of regional cooperation. I'm Wendy Cutler, Senior Vice President of the Asia Society Policy Institute, and I run the Washington office. Our discussions this morning come just days after the conclusion of the APEC leaders meeting in Korea, where leaders tackled some of the region's most pressing economic and geopolitical challenges. And today, we'll do our best to unpack the outcomes of APEC and explore how these developments will shape the Asia-Pacific region's economic and trade landscape. We'll also look ahead to China's host year of APEC next year and discuss which issues may be subject to ongoing work and what China's priorities may be going forward. Now, on a personal note, when I worked at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, for a number of years I was responsible for APEC. And actually, the first APEC year events I attended was in 2005, when coincidentally Korea hosted. And I always remember that the slogan or the theme for that year was "Meet the challenge, make the change." You remember that, Chul? And I think it's just such a fitting theme because when you think of the Asia-Pacific region, you think of resilience, change, adaptation, and cooperation. But let's be honest, the region has changed dramatically since those days 20 years ago, now becoming really the global hub for economic growth, innovation, and trend setting. But the region's also facing challenges as geopolitical tensions are rising, trade protectionism is increasing, and it's becoming more difficult to find areas of consensus and cooperation for future work. But even with these constraints, Korea successfully navigated through all of this, and I think you will agree with me by the end of this event that Korea really did an amazing job hosting APEC this year. So let's kick off this event, and it is my pleasure to introduce Ambassador Kyung-wha Kang. She was appointed ambassador just last month from the Republic of Korea to the United States. Importantly for us, before assuming this position, she was president and CEO of the Asia Society. And while we miss her already, we're just delighted to welcome her back to our virtual stage. And so with that, Dr. Kang, Ambassador Kang, if I can then just turn it over to you, and we're honored to have you here, and just help us unpack from Korea's perspective what was achieved during the APEC week. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Kang to the stage.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Wonderful to be joining you. I would have much rather preferred to be there in person, but my current work has kept me in DC, but very happy to join you by Zoom. And thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's a bit odd to be hearing my own voice as part of the introductory video about Asia Society that you just played. But I think that indicates my strong connection to Asia Society and my continuing commitment and support for the great work that the Asia Society and its Policy Institute continues to do. Let me just give you in very broad strokes about the last week's APEC leaders meetings, and I think the details can be further unpacked in the following panel. As you note, Wendy, by all accounts, the APEC Summit week in Gyeongju was a big success, substantively and logistically. But that was not assured when the new government of Korea started preparing for it in earnest barely 5 months ago after it came to office in early June. As you know, these are very testing times for the values of multilateralism on which APEC has been built and grown. And as a founding member of APEC, Korea has greatly benefited from its strong support for free trade, investment, innovation, and sustainable and inclusive growth. So in chairing APEC 2025, Korea's aim has thus been to shore up the abiding relevance of APEC as a platform for multilateral collaboration. So, as chair, Korea decided to prioritize a few specific goals to achieve during the year. First and foremost, we wanted to reaffirm APEC's role in sustaining dialogue among the 21 diverse economies. We knew that failing to unite and reach consensus could amplify the doubts about the future of APEC. In the end, against the odds, this year's ministerial and high level meetings held under the theme Building a Sustainable Tomorrow and three distinct priorities connect, innovate, and prosper produced consensus based documents with support from all 21 member economies. A year of senior leaders and ministerial meetings came to fruition last week during the Economic Leaders Meeting. On the first day, the leaders discussed how APEC and its partners can work together to promote trade and investment and to ensure they remain connected despite rising uncertainties. On the second day, the leaders discussed how APEC members' economies can continue to work together amid certain emerging trends, including rapid AI development, far-reaching demographic changes, and thriving cultural and creative industries. And following the conclusion of the two-day meeting, the leaders of all 21 member economies issued the Gyeongju Declaration, outlining the outcomes of this year's discussion and setting out their vision for the future. The Gyeongju Declaration spells out APEC's mid to long-term pathway towards an open, dynamic, resilient, and peaceful Asia-Pacific under the Putrajaya Vision 2040. In the document, the leaders recognize that robust trade and investment are vital to the growth and prosperity of the Asia-Pacific region. They committed to building a dynamic and interconnected regional economy, to prepare for the digital and AI transformation, and to addressing challenges together in a way that shares the benefits of growth for all. But unlike in previous years, they were unable to include references to free trade or reaffirm the importance of the rules-based multilateral trading system with the WTO at its core. However, the joint ministerial statement adopted at the APEC ministerial meeting included compromise language on the importance of the WTO to advance trade issues. Of particular note for Korea, for the first time ever, the APEC leaders referenced cultural and creative industries, CCI, by recognizing CCI as a new growth engine in the Asia-Pacific and reaffirming the need for enhanced CCI cooperation. Throughout the year, Korea has worked closely with member economies to address the new challenges facing the Asia-Pacific, including the transformative impacts of artificial intelligence and demographic shifts on our economies and societies. And this work led to the leaders to also endorse two key deliverables: the APEC AI Initiative and the APEC Collaborative Framework for Demographic Changes. On AI, there has been a shared recognition that AI transformation can serve as a catalyst for economic growth, and that the benefits of this transition must be widely distributed across all economies and sectors. The APEC AI Initiative is APEC's first joint vision and the first leaders-level agreement on AI endorsed by all member economies, regardless of their stage of economic development. It focuses on using AI for strategic planning, building capacity across sectors, and fostering infrastructure development with private sector engagement. Korea also introduced demographic change as a new discussion area, given its profound implication on labor, social cohesion, and long-term growth. In the document, APEC Collaborative Framework for Demographic Changes, APEC leaders recognized the challenges of demographic change for the first time and created a collaborative framework to address it. And we certainly hope that these three documents, consensus documents, will continue to guide APEC's path forward to next year's meetings in Shenzhen, China. An important part of the success of APEC in Gyeongju was the high-level engagement by the private sector. The APEC CEO Summit this year brought together more than 1,700 global business leaders alongside President Lee, President Trump, and other APEC leaders as speakers. They included top leaders of SK, Samsung, and Hyundai Motors from Korea, NVIDIA, Amazon, and Microsoft from the United States, and many others from every member economy. The CEO Summit included 4 days of discussions on common challenges, including bridging the gaps created by AI and digital transformation across member economies, and tackling the energy transition and technology competition. This year's APEC also served as a platform for numerous bilateral summit meetings, which produced concrete deliverables. President Lee and President Trump met for the second time in less than 3 months, further strengthening their personal rapport and trust and reaching agreement in a wide range of sectors, including trade and tariffs, investments, and the security alliance. In addition, President Lee had his first summit with Chinese President Xi, who visited Korea for the first time in 11 years. His first meeting also with the new Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, as well as meetings with other APEC leaders, including those from Canada, New Zealand, Thailand, Vietnam, Australia, the Philippines, Chile, Indonesia, and Singapore. APEC also provided the opportunity for the first meeting between President Trump and President Xi since President Trump returned to office in January, and this led to a new trade and economic deal. The success of the leaders' meeting has reaffirmed the importance of APEC's economy first agenda by insulating the discussions from the geopolitical winds and creating opportunities for cooperation and convergence. Also, its design as a non-binding, consensus-driven forum has fostered candid exchanges that complement and reinforce the multilateral trading system. But the format alone is no guarantee of success. As this year's chair, Korea ambitiously pursued 3 key outcome documents that would validate APEC's approach. In total, Korea hosted 14 ministerial-level meetings and led intensive negotiations right up to the final hours of the leaders' meeting. And ultimately, it was thanks to the member economies' cooperation and shared commitment to regional growth and prosperity that we were able to reach consensus on all 3 documents. In conclusion, we believe our chairmanship shored up the relevance of APEC in these difficult times. The Gyeongju Declaration will help strengthen cooperation in the Asia-Pacific, relax tensions, and lead towards our shared goals of inclusive and sustainable growth, prosperity through innovation, and enhanced collective resilience. And the AI initiative and the joint framework on demographic change have broadened APEC's horizon, opening new areas for cooperation. Going forward, the Republic of Korea will continue to stand with APEC in the face of future global challenges. We look forward to all APEC members building on the spirit forged in Gyeongju. And to this end, we will work very closely with next year's host, China, to carry the momentum forward. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Kang, and you've really shared with us really the breadth and the depth of the APEC work this year. And I think just to underscore, while we all kind of focus on that Leaders Week, the APEC year goes on all year. And I think you mentioned 14 ministerial meetings, and I can't even imagine how many working group meetings there must have been. But thank you for your perspective on the year. And frankly, it was a very productive year. So congratulations to you and your government for hosting such a successful APEC year. So next, we're going to be joined virtually by Mace, who's the U.S. senior official for APEC. He's had a long and distinguished career at the State Department, and he's really no stranger to Asia, having just served as the DCM at our embassy in Singapore, but has also had postings in China, Australia, and Indonesia. And during the first term of Trump, he served as the NSC Southeast Asian Director. So welcome, Casey. I hope you're on the screen soon. And really welcome hearing your take on the APEC year from the U.S. perspective, and which of the deliverables and initiatives that were discussed and agreed to in Korea from the U.S. perspective were the most meaningful. That would, I think, be helpful to help us frame our panel discussion. But thank you for joining us, Casey.
Good. Thank you, Wendy. It's a real honor to be with you virtually. I really wish I was there in person. If for no other reason, to reconnect with people I greatly admire. Among those include Danny Russel on your panel, who I worked for at the State Department and played a big role in influencing my career. I try to emulate his tenacity every day still. And of course, Wendy Cutler, who looms large in the trade world in the region, but also in Washington. So it's a great honor for me to be part of this event. And hopefully the next time you host one of these, I can travel to New York to join you. But I'd start by saying that as the ambassador said, and Wendy said, the APEC event that we just experienced was a great success, and in large part due to Korea's leadership all year. They did a tremendous job organizing an ambitious agenda. They identified pillars, priority areas that helped focus the region on forward-looking issues, and namely AI and the demographics issue. So they really set out an important and forward-looking agenda, and they led these 21 economies in tremendous ways to achieve consensus time after time, and that culminating in the Leaders' Week. There are three reasons I'd like to share with you why I think this APEC was especially significant for the United States and for the region. First, the robust U.S. engagement, participation, and investment all year should leave no one in doubt about the U.S. commitment to APEC under the new administration, and should leave no one in doubt in the United States about the value APEC represents to the United States. The United States, over the course of this year, led 11 different lines of effort at the working level that included updating workshops that updated rules of origin, harmonized technical standards, shaped common approaches on secure data flows, promoted regional adoption of cloud technologies, and generated broader acceptance of LNG for regional energy resilience. The United States also invested in APEC by increasing its financial support for our APEC Rise initiative, a State Department funded initiative that supports these work streams throughout the region to the tune of another $5 million this year, the new administration approved. The United States was actively engaged in all of the ministerials that the ambassador mentioned at a very senior level, including with Ambassador Greer at the trade ministerial in the summer, and of course, culminating in a very robust participation by President Trump and a number of his senior cabinet officials that traveled with him to Gyeongju to participate in various APEC events. So the robust U.S. engagement really was a strong statement of our commitment and a signal of our interest in continuing to work through APEC to advance the United States economic agenda. Number two, it was significant because, as the ambassador mentioned, the region came together and endorsed consensus statement after consensus statement throughout the year, something like 12 ministerial consensus statements, and then 4 or 3 consensus statements at the leader level, including the Gyeongju Declaration. So it was that alone, I think, is important. People often take for granted, because there's a great practice of generating these statements, the amount of work that's required to achieve these. But all 21 economies remained committed to working together, to finding common purpose, and to enunciate what they believe the region should be focused on to achieve broader cooperation and to tackle the challenges that are facing the region in a consensus way. So that I think was very significant and very positive. And third, it was significant because the United States was able to advance the America First economic agenda in very important ways through APEC, which is why I believe the administration sees this as a valuable platform and why the American people should see it as a valuable platform. I'll focus on three ways that we were able to advance this agenda. One was we were able to promote the fair and balanced trade, the focus area for the president's trade agenda in important ways. As I mentioned, we led 11 lines of effort, and a lot of these are focused on opening up markets, reducing barriers to trade, which is so vital to be able to establish fairer trade, to allow for American exports to grow in a region and to close the deficit gap that we are experiencing with Asia. So there's a lot of work that we do with Asia and through APEC to open up markets. And one significant thing that the United States did this year at APEC was we helped author a ease of doing business action plan that was endorsed at the ministerial level that lays out a plan for the next 5 years that helps the region find ways that allow businesses and make it easier for businesses to engage and for the United States businesses to sell their goods and services. But I also mentioned the other lines of effort we were involved in, including harmonizing regulations and updating rules of origin. These are important. This is important technical work that contributes to broader markets for U.S. exports. Two, we really focused on promoting AI and its ecosystem, thanks to the priority area that the Republic of Korea made for this host year. So as Ambassador mentioned, the leaders endorsed a leader's statement on AI. But more than that, what the Republic of Korea was very successful in doing was injecting AI and the value of AI and the promise and potential of AI and all of the ministerial meetings that took place over the course of the year. So the health ministers talked about ways that AI can support health systems. And the energy ministers talked about ways that AI can support more efficient energy. And trade ministers talked about ways that AI can support better trade in the region. So on and on across all the different ministerial domains, AI was a key factor, and it broadened the conversation and really broadened the exposure of the opportunities AI presents to policymakers across the region in these various areas. And of course, the United States is a leading country on the development of AI and the implementation of AI. We have world-class AI products and services. We're moving fast in the region to see that U.S. AI services are being adopted. Our companies are very active in promoting the AI solutions we offer, but so too are the U.S. technology companies that support the back end of AI, the cloud computing and cloud services and data centers and semiconductor chips. All of these are really important sectors for the American economy. And thanks to the focus on this issue this year, the United States was really able to promote U.S. solutions, U.S. exports in this area. And at the digital ministerial, the first time an APEC had a digital ministerial, the United States White House Office of Science and Technology Policy Director, Kratsios, led the U.S. delegation there. And it took place just after the White House announced its AI action plan. So Director Kratsios was able to highlight that AI action plan and U.S. commitment to promoting the export of the AI tech stack to the region. He was joined by leaders in the U.S. industry, in U.S. AI and technology industry, who also engaged in the APEC events and conversations to highlight what the U.S. Tech sector can offer the region. So that, I think, was very important for advancing the United States economic leadership and presence in the region. And then finally, this year's leader statement, but also the energy ministerial elevated the role LNG plays as an energy solution. And it also, the United States was able to focus the region around focusing on the importance of energy affordability and reliability as objectives and goals for our energy conversation and the region's energy agenda. So I think that was important for the United States. Obviously, we're a big exporter of LNG. We would like to export more LNG to the region. And APEC this year did a great job of emphasizing and highlighting the opportunities LNG offers on the energy front. Of course, there were many other ways that we engaged over the course of the year. One of the strengths of APEC is how comprehensive it is. It's evolved over the years to include ministries and policy officials from really all areas of national effort. And so we were able to advance different priorities, food security, for example, at the agricultural ministerial. But I'll leave it at those kind of three top level areas that we were successful in advancing the agenda. And I'll conclude there. Thanks for including me in this discussion. Thanks for focusing those in New York and in the United States on what just happened. Gyeongju, it was a long way away, but it was very significant for the three reasons I mentioned. So thank you.
Welcome to our panel. And before we go any further, I would just like to express our thanks to the Korea Foundation for its support of this event. What I'm going to do now is just briefly introduce the speakers so we can get right into our conversation. To my right is Dr. Chul Chung. He's the president of the Korea Economic Research Institute and chief research officer of FKI, the Federation of Korean Industries. And importantly for this discussion, and there's a lot of APEC speak, so bear with me, he co-chairs COPEC, which is Korea's branch of the Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, the PEC. We're going to quiz you after all of this. A forum that brings together business, government, and academia across the region. And that then gets me into Richard Cantor, our other panelist. And I would just say here that he serves as chair of the U.S. National Committee of the PEC and as co-chair of PEC International. He previously served as one of the U.S. 3 representatives on the APEC Business Advisory Council, and in his day job, he is vice chairman at Moody's Ratings. So he's going to bring a lot of experience here and a lot of insights. And to my right is my close colleague, Danny Russel, a distinguished fellow now at the Asia Society Policy Institute. He really doesn't need any introduction. He's had an extremely distinguished career at the State Department as well as the National Security Council, and just few people in America have their pulse on Asia like Danny. So grateful that he could attend. So let's get right into this then. So we just heard 2 very upbeat presentations about all of the accomplishments coming out of the APEC year, both from a Korean and a U.S. perspective. And I would really welcome your individual kind of candid assessments of APEC 2025. And, what would be interesting for me is to hear, and for the audience, which of these deliverables really means something, because a lot of them do sound like a lot of words, but not really sure what they really mean in a practical sense. And then I would, the other just question here to kind of fit into your responses, as we think of APEC going forward, is it still relevant? I mean, it was created to address a lot of these economic challenges. These challenges are getting pretty enormous these days. And I was just noting, based on what Dr. Kang was saying, the U.S., opposing language in statements that talk about free trade liberalization, the WTO, issues that used to be the bread and butter for APEC. So, Chul, I'm going to start with you and kind of ask you for your reflections.
Thank you, Wendy. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here. Um, and first of all, I'd like to say that this year's APEC meetings, you know, both the Ambassador Kang and Mr. Mace said that it was a success. So how can I say it was not a success?
I'm not asking you to say that.
So I think it was incredible success. First of all, actually we came to a conclusion of this leaders meeting, and we got the declaration out. Not every APEC year actually produced declaration, so it was a great success. And we invite the both Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi, President Xi and President Trump came. Although Mr. Trump could not attend the leaders meeting, there was a little bit of disappointment, but at least he came. And third, actually, there was no big incident, out of this the leaders meeting week. So I think that's a great success. And also, as Ambassador Kang mentioned, there are three first timers in APEC history. First, APEC AI initiative, and second, the demographic issue, and actually we said that the collaborative framework for the demographic change partnership, and third one is the cultural and creative industry partnership as well. The third one actually basically, as you all know, that these days the K culture, K drama, K pop, K food, all over the world. So it's not just about the Korea's culture, but we try to promote the cultural elements within the Asia Pacific region, so that we can exchange more ideas, culture, and the become together, for the future. But from the Korea's perspective, I think it's a great combination of the K culture with the industrial evolution. So I think that is going to be a good combination, and I think Korean government is going to push for the further developing this kind of the initiative. So I think those are things. But I'd like to mention that there was, and Wendy mentioned that she first attended APEC meeting in 2005. I think at the time we also addressed some of those demographic issues already, but at the time the concern was slowing population growth. These days, we are talking about reducing population, right? That's big change. And at the time, the concern was fiscal burden. Now we're talking about the AI and the fast-growing technology. How to combine this with the population, the structural change? I think the answer should be the productivity, and that we can come up with the good solution with both the demography issue and the AI and technology.
Thank you. Danny, maybe I can turn to you then. Chul just mentioned that there was some disappointment in Korea and among other APEC economies that our president could not stay for the leaders meeting. Is this unusual? I mean, there have been times in the past where the U.S. president has not participated, and Casey Mace made a big point of underscoring the U.S. commitment to APEC. But I'd be interested in your insights there, and maybe any other insights you can provide in like what's involved in hosting a meeting like this, and how important is the APEC agenda versus all the bilateral meetings that are taking place on the side?
Okay.
And you have 2 minutes.
All right. Without a doubt, although Casey pointed out correctly that APEC is a year-long project and it's got 11 lines of, or U.S. had 11 lines of effort, et cetera, the fact is that the summit is the leaders meeting is the culminating event. And so for the President of the United States to be in Korea, to be in the region, but to leave before the leaders meeting, before the summit, it's a little bit like going to the rehearsal dinner but not showing up at the wedding. It's not a good thing. It's not a good look. And strategically, politically, practically, the optics really do matter, I think. I think it's pretty significant. If showing up is 80% of life, then we started at 20% and went from there. The fact is, as you mentioned, that other U.S. presidents have missed APEC leaders meetings, but they've missed them because there was a crisis at home that required their engagement and presence, not because they wanted to get back for a weekend of golf.
We have an emergency here.
Yes, well, the Supreme Court will rule on that, so I won't touch that. I mean, I will say that first, that I think APEC has strategic value, but that strategic value is really a function of A, having a strategy, but B, of leaders, and particularly the leaders of the major economies, being willing to invest in it, to participate in it, to take it seriously, to drive it forward, and to make something of those many lines of effort and the work that's done over the year. And we, you know, George Bush used APEC to introduce major efforts on counterterrorism and on public health that are in train still today. You and Barack Obama used APEC to turbocharge TPP. The Biden administration has recently used it to champion digital trade and supply chain security, et cetera. So it's important in that respect. There's no question that the opportunity for leaders to have bilateral meetings is tremendously useful. That's a critical part of it. But to fail to utilize the APEC leaders meeting to champion causes, to really advance an agenda, is a very significant missed opportunity, I think, at a minimum. As a sort of geopolitical matter, the no-show by the president of the U.S. at the leaders meeting itself literally handed the stage to China's Xi Jinping. And it, I think, did Xi's work for him. The narrative that the Chinese are marketing is that China is the responsible country, that China is dependable, China is there, is predictable, is steady. Chinese markets and Chinese investments are not going away, whereas the U.S. is capricious, unpredictable, bringing tariffs, bringing chaos, et cetera. And so I think the meeting itself served as almost a graphic demonstration of what the Chinese are trying to articulate. I would say that I'm very intrigued by the APEC AI initiative. I think that has the potential to be very significant, but again, it really depends on the engagement. We know that China is engaged, and if this is an initiative that's going to set rules for AI, that's going to help shape AI infrastructure and standards on data and transparency and ethics and so on. I don't think the U.S. should be at the golf course while China is at the table setting these rules.
And particularly next year, just for everyone's, just to pay attention to, China is hosting APEC. And so as host, you really have a lot of opportunity to drive the agenda. Okay, maybe Richard, we can move over to you then. With your hat on from the U.S. business community, which of these deliverables are meaningful? Or when you look at this APEC meeting, like what are your takeaways in terms of what's really important? Because again, a lot of words, but what really matters from a practical and business perspective?
Thanks for the question, Wendy. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks to the Asia Society as well. Well, let me just say first, my conversation with the business community was not as concerned about the president's absence at the leaders meeting. From a business perspective, I didn't hear concerns about that. And actually, from a broader perspective, since the president met at that time with many of the key leaders individually, I don't think a lack of commitment to the region was experienced. And in terms of the objectives that the U.S. had for APEC, I think they were delivered, as Casey Mace indicated. So his absence didn't lead to a failure to deliver on U.S. objectives. And those objectives, by the way, were very closely tied with business objectives. And I wanted to make 2 points about APEC in general. One is APEC is not as large as many of the other multilateral forums, so it's not as small as a bilateral, so it may be a Goldilocks size for many problems that have to be addressed, and I think that will continue to be the case. But the other thing that makes APEC special is the direct line of communication that business has into the process, not just in the formal meeting of APEC members with leaders on the day before the leaders meeting, but also all through the year. There's back and forth in conversations what the business community is looking for from the APEC process. And I think this is so important because the goals that the leaders have are generally going to require a business sector implementation. So number one, the business sector will make suggestions on what those goals might be, but of course leaders have more interest at heart than just those of the business community. But whatever objectives the leaders set, they're going to need business to implement. And I think APEC does a great job at integrating those two. Now, U.S. firms, what were their objectives? Many of them, frictionless trade, low tariffs. These are longstanding objectives, level playing fields, free data flow, limited data localization requirements, light regulation of AI and digital trade, and for the economies generally to prepare themselves for the adoption of AI. These are all, some of the objectives. And also we have objectives in pharmaceuticals areas and so on. Now, APEC during the course of the year put together a list of, 25, 30 recommendations, substantive recommendations in this area, and most of them found their way into the final leaders' declaration in one form or another. So I think there was a great success from the business community point of view, particularly the U.S. community's point of view, of seeing their desired objectives represented in that final statement. Some material follow-through will be the APEC Center of Excellence for Paperless Trade, the APEC AI initiative that we already spoke about, calls for the capacity building within the economies to get ready for AI and the building of the infrastructure that's going to be needed in the data centers and the like. But most importantly, there was the absence of any call for what would be perceived by the business community as heavy-handed AI regulation, and there was an endorsement of genomics-driven precision medicine. So a lot was achieved from the business community's perspective. The one item that I heard there was some frustration around, but really not surprising, was that APEC would like to see a permanent WTO moratorium on digital taxes. Now it's a rolling moratorium every 2 years that's up for renewal. That was not yet achieved, but to get consensus around that was bound to be challenging.
Chul, over to you. From a Korean business perspective, which of the outcomes were the most significant, or where were there disappointments?
Like I said, the AI and the technology sector. Actually, there was the APEC AI initiative, and that's actually aiming to set the standards for the region, and maybe hopefully for the global. That's what the APEC is for, right? The APEC is forum. It's non-binding and the voluntary, right? Basically, so basically it's kind of the test bed and the incubator of ideas. So we can put this through the APEC pipeline, and then the develop that into the more global. Although we did not mention, unfortunately, the WTO this time, but still, we can use APEC as a platform for the building some sort of the new standards for the new technology and new digital trade and so on. So
But that, that was always an objective for APEC. Like you're the incubator, a kind of a non-threatening environment where you can just bring issues to the table and work on them. Is that, given the membership in APEC now, is that just becoming more challenging?
right, but the right now WTO is not really functioning, as we all know. And what WTO is trying to do is the going sectoral, right? So some of those interested members just get together and make some agreement, and then open it to the other members. So in APEC we have open regionalism, right? So we can actually use the APEC, and we can make some sort of the agreement within APEC, and then open it to the other countries, right? To the world. And that may be the good way to develop this kind of the standard. Right now, the U.S. we all know that the U.S. and China are competing with each other in particularly because of this AI. We all know that AI is going to be the engine for the growth in the future, maybe from today, right? So I think we would like to have the some sort of advantage in the technology and in the sort of the standards and the system and so on. So it's very difficult to do this separately. But I think the APEC is kind of unique, having the both China and U.S. and many other Asian countries together with the Pacific. So I think this is the best place to do that. What other alternative do we have, right? I'd like to ask that question. So I think that's a great place, and we should try. And as Danny mentioned, that the next year's China might be, pushing further this AI initiative in the APEC. I'm sure. So I think the many business community people are expecting that there could be some tangible outcome. Although whether we don't know whether it's going to be the implementable or not really, but still we are hopeful about this.
And any indication of what China's priorities might be next year? May they continue some of the work? Because one of the strengths of APEC was that even though different countries hosted each year, we tried to, make sure that the hosts were coordinating each year to take forward work year, to the next year. Any indication from China yet?
So this year's priority areas, I mean, three ones, right? Connect, innovate, and prosper. I think
That's
Korea's,
yeah.
yeah, right. And basically, building a sustainable tomorrow. But I think China has in 2014, China also emphasized the connectivity, right, as well. I think they will try to do that with some sort of the supply chain related issues maybe. And this year, actually, the APEC leaders meeting, leaders declaration, first time in 8 years, they put this FTAP, the free trade area of the Asia Pacific. It has been
Sneak
gone.
it in when the U.S. couldn't see it?
I don't know. But that is FTAP. That word is in the declaration. So maybe because the Mr. Trump left, I don't know. But anyway, that FTAP, China in 2014 pushed for, right, at the time when the United States was pushing for TPP. So I think that they might revitalize that. And AI, obviously, and demographic issue, China is also facing. So of all this, I think that there could be a continuum of this APEC themes from Korea to China, and of course, the China might bring something else too. But I think I could say that there could be plenty of the similarity between the Korea's priority areas and the China's areas too.
I would also add demographics, because that's a challenge that's not only facing Korea, but Japan and China as well as in other countries in the region. Richard, now with your PEC hat on, the Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, where you're co-chair, right, of all of 21 economies, from a PEC perspective, what were the major accomplishments, and what were there disappointments with these outcomes?
Well, let me first note that I'm co-chair with Ambassador Zhan from China, and we work very well together. It's been 5 years, and next year we're looking forward to the 6th. And we've had hosted events together, and have always been able to reach agreement on priorities. In terms of what PEC contributes, I think we're kind of an independent, more relatively disinterested party, so we can be kind of a conscience of APEC. We helped establish APEC originally, and so we can remind the leaders of effectively the Putrajaya vision, in which we had a hand in that, and in the earlier incarnations as well. But on the day-to-day, we work on many of the structural technical issues, and in the demographic sector, for example, we helped flesh out a variety of options that economies have to deal with the demographic challenge. I think we're also trying to put on the agenda for next year. We started this year, it wasn't really on the demographic agenda, but to focus on retirement savings and the management of retirement savings, which I think will be of interest to American firms as well. But in terms of really changing the dynamic that we have now, where the U.S. administration has chosen to use the purchasing power of the U.S. consumer as a tool to change trade dynamics and open doors, achieve a number of policy objectives. That's going to be pursued as the Trump administration chooses to, and PEC's not going to reverse that. What will happen there will depend upon perhaps certainly just a settling down of negotiations into what we're seeing now, which is a fairly modest or reasonable tariff that's somewhat equal across the board, not yet across the board, but we'll see if that ends up being the case. If so, and that would deliver the kind of stability and certainty that business looks for in order to make its investment decisions. Alternatively, there could be some more chaos that could be fine for the world economy, or it could lead to global recession, high inflation, exchange rate volatility, and the like, and stock market crashes and so on. So we'll see what happens. Any of those things, I think, would cause a redirection of U.S. policy, but I don't think organizations like PEC are going to be the key drivers of such decisions.
Danny, over to you. So this APEC meeting came at the end of a week stay of the president in Asia attending the ASEAN meetings, and frankly, few presidents in recent years have attended those summits. He concluded a number of trade agreements, and in particular, from my perspective, the agreement that he signed with Malaysia was extremely detailed and very revealing about what the priorities for the administration will be in trade deals. Then he had a very successful stay in Japan. I happened by coincidence to be in Tokyo then, and you could just feel the excitement on the streets in Tokyo with the new prime minister and the chemistry between the president and the new prime minister, Takaichi-san. And then, of course, over to APEC, where a lot of the focus was on the bilateral meeting, with Xi Jinping. I'd just be interested in your perspective when you look at this week and you compare it maybe to some of the other trips that you worked on and joined presidents for. How would you rate it? What were, where were the successes and where were some of the gaps?
Well, it's very good and important that President Trump made it all the way across the Pacific and came to Asia. I think that there were some inducements for him that Prime Minister of Malaysia, as the chair of ASEAN, was incredibly deft in dangling the prospect of heroic welcome allowing
With the YMCA
with
greeting him at the
YMCA,
tarmac.
yeah, with the soundtrack in the background. But beyond that, ceding to President Trump the claim that he had brokered a resolution of the border conflict between Thailand and Cambodia, and that he could be present and preside over this great triumph. Remember, these decisions about travel were being made in the run-up to the decision by the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, so hope sprang eternal. And I think also clearly the big draw was the prospect of Donald Trump being able to meet with Xi Jinping, something that he had evinced immense interest, desire to achieve since the transition, frankly, before he even was inaugurated. So whatever the motives, the fact that he came is important. One thing that is very striking is the sort of common playbook that each of the hosts used. I have a feeling there's a dog-eared manual circulating among leaders.
Or a chat. And
Yeah, right, or maybe a signal group, how to handle the guy. When you look at the picture, the sort of thought bubble over the countries in the region seem to be, this guy's potentially very volatile and dangerous. He needs to be handled just right. And the key is to lavish praise, to create huge pomp and ceremony, to fet him, to give him gold-covered tchotchkes, fill in the blanks, crowns, golf balls, you name it, and really play to his ego, and you can have a good visit. And the evidence suggests that that worked in as far as the visits themselves were concerned. We know, we've seen from experience that sort of the morning after, the weeks after, the months after, a good visit, a good meeting doesn't provide any insulation against the prospects of massive tariffs or some kind of vitriol. But the fact is that those tactics seem to be pretty effective. But again, it's not lost on anyone, I'm not a trade person. From a geopolitical standpoint, the positive presence of the U.S. president in Asia, I think, was significantly offset by the agenda, or more frankly, the lack of an agenda. There's a real effort underway in the administration now to try to push back against the perception that the administration is isolationist, is oriented around spheres of influence, and puts a priority on the Western Hemisphere, on the Americas, and hence we're seeing cabinet secretaries meet, travel, etc. But that's become a real uphill battle, and I think we see tremendous skepticism about the U.S. commitment, about U.S. reliability, about American staying power, and that feeds very directly into a question that I know you're going to ask, which is about next year, the Shenzhen APEC that China will host.
Okay, before we get to that, Chul, let me, ask you, because one of the surprises was the announcement of a U.S. Korea, I want to get the words right, I think it's called a framework deal. Like, we had a deal in principle, now we have a framework deal. We've seen nothing in writing, but it seems like the meeting between the two leaders was kind of the action-forcing event and really turned around a negotiation which was facing some major, major challenges, particularly with respect to this $350 billion investment fund. Were you surprised that a deal was reached? And how is that deal now being, I know it's being finalized, but how is it being viewed in Korea? Because I know that there was a lot of early concern about this investment fund in particular and what that would mean to the Korean economy.
Right. As you said, there was a surprise. But it was a good surprise to many Korean companies and Koreans. because we did not expect that, because the negotiation was getting longer, but at towards the end, I mean, like you said, the action forcing event. This is the APEC, the hosting country, Korea, and so I think that actually provided some sort of the momentum for that negotiation, and eventually, most Koreans welcome this the deal made, and it is very difficult for from the Korean perspective, because Danny mentioned about the security and the geoeconomic, I mean the geopolitical perspective, but from the economic and the trade perspective, we are sitting at the table with the United States. Koreans are. It's a looks like a bilateral, but it's not really bilateral, because it's like the we are also competing with Japanese and Europeans and some other countries as well, because that's the way of this negotiation structure the U.S. is having. Of course, it is not efficient. It would be much more efficient if it's plurilateral or it's a multilateral. Then we
We
get
don't use
together.
those words
right,
in
right.
Washington
So,
anymore.
but we get together. Everybody gets together at once, and then we can negotiate, and then the U.S. can put some things on the table and so on. But I think from the U.S. perspective, it's more effective for the U.S. So U.S. gains. I mean, especially with the market, the biggest market in the world, and the technology. And I think this Trump administration is trying to maximize the advantage the United States has, and that's the best way to do it is bilateral. On the surface, but not really a bilateral. Let all the other countries compete with each other. So the many Korean, most of I mean, all the Korean negotiators were, pressured by the deal made between the U.S. and Japan, because many of those products that Korean companies sell, bring here in the United States, they have to compete with the Japanese products and also European products, and especially for like cars, for example. And they have already 15% tariff, and we have 25% tariff. So I think the time we were actually, the time was an enemy for the Korean side, but we did not really give up on this this investment. Now, how we actually do this, because that's a huge amount. $350 billion. Korean U.S. dollar reserve is only $4,200 billion. So that's more than 80% of the Korean dollar reserves. How can we do this without really carefully designing this and communicating with the United States. So I think the details are, I mean the devil is in the details, and I think there are some hard negotiation between the U.S. and Korea, and I think the Korean side actually already proposed some the rational kind of the reasonable set of the packages to the United States, but I guess the U.S. is still considering this package. How to deal, whether they will accept or they would like to make some changes or not.
So just a quick question on, because you talk about, and I've seen this too, each country's watching what the other country's getting or giving as they try and figure out what they should get or give. When it comes to semiconductors, where there is a Section 232 national security investigation, both Japan and the EU secured a 15% tariff. But it was interesting that for Korea, the reference point in the agreement was Taiwan.
Right.
And so is that viewed, how is that viewed in Korea? There's no deal with Taiwan yet, so we don't really know what this means. But there is, talk that what we're going to ask the Taiwanese semiconductor companies to do is to invest a lot more in the United States. So how is that angle of the negotiation being viewed among Korean companies, or more broadly in Korea, or everyone's just waiting for the details?
Right. We're waiting for the details because the Korean side and the American side, they say differently. So that I think from the Korean government,
That's
they
never
say,
good.
so they say that Korea, it's like a future provision, right? So Korean semiconductor industry is not going to be treated disadvantageously against the Taiwanese, but Korean industry maybe would like to have the better than that, maybe, but still it's not clear because Americans the Secretary Lieutenant and said that the semiconductor was not on the agenda. I mean, on the table. So we are a little bit confused. So we are still waiting. But I do not think that the semiconductor industry is not a big, concern because where else the U.S. will get these semiconductors other than Korea? So I think that's of course we have concern and we'd like to have the uncertainty cleared up, but that is not the biggest concern for Korea right now.
Okay, I'm going to have one more round of questions, just discussing briefly the China 2026 host year, but then we'll be opening it up for questions. So please start thinking of what you might want to ask. Before I just end this conversation with you, just when we look to China 2026, what should we be looking for? I think, Danny, we were both at APEC 2014, the last time China hosted. I remember just working on, a bilateral negotiation and not being, I have very little recollection of the overall event. But what I do remember, there was just a lot of ceremonies, a lot of symbolism, a lot of, just trying to convey that, China is a very formidable participant in the Asia Pacific community. What should we be looking for this year?
Well, what we should be looking out for this year. China has tremendous convening power, a lot of experience, and a lot of skill in hosting these big gatherings. They do it annually in a variety of contexts with the Africans and FOCAC, et cetera. Think about the Olympics. In this system, in the Chinese system, they are good at going all out, and they will unquestionably go all out. I think the big theme we should be braced for in Shenzhen is going to be multilateralism, but multilateralism with Chinese characteristics, and that's particularly true, as Chul was alluding to, in AI, where standards are everything. We're incredibly important, and the Chinese clearly will see an opportunity to try to draw countries into the Chinese AI system or broader digital system. The theme of multilateralism is also, I think, tailor-made to exclude or to marginalize the United States, given that in your list of forbidden words, multilateralism is pretty close to the top in Washington. Right. So that will be something. Made a very good and important point, I think, about the, as Joel said, the one-on-one negotiating style. So China, and the irony is that on the political side, my experience in government consistently was that it was always China that insisted that sensitive issues needed to be negotiated on a bilateral basis, where you had big country versus little country. They had a huge advantage. And as you all were describing, could take the sort of cherry pick the outcomes from a previous round with someone else and set that as the floor for what they were going after. So there's an interesting combination, I think, of the bilateral and the multilateral. China is framing itself as the champion of the rules-based order of multilateralism and so on. So it, in addition to trying to embed the Chinese norms and systems in the digital economy, AI, and other things, in addition to, I think, trying to marginalize the United States, I think we are going to see more of this campaign for FTAB, the regional trade arrangement in which China is the major actor.
I think FTAP will then move to the top of the list before multilateralism.
It's unquestionably on its way. The last thing I didn't mention, but should have, in terms of what appealed to Donald Trump and brought him to Asia, was the prospect of meeting with Kim Jong-un. I don't think we're going to see Kim Jong-un show up at Shenzhen, but I think it's indicative of the priorities that the administration has revealed in terms of its approach and perceptions of the Asia-Pacific region.
And Richard, the final question from me to you would be, when you look at the fact that China's hosting APEC next year, we're seeing the prospect of 2 visits by President Trump to China next year, both in April, as he's announced. I don't think China's confirmed that or actually welcomed him, but also for the October, November, whenever the leaders' meeting is. And at least our president is talking about President Xi Jinping coming to the United States. Does this, can this lead to more stability in the relationship? In other words, we just reached, a deal, deal in quotes, because I don't really consider it a trade deal, but we just kind of reached a truce with China where both sides kind of have unwound a lot of these escalatory measures. But I think we'd all agree it's pretty fragile. But does the fact that not only is China hosting APEC, we're chairing the G20, which will also mean more Chinese officials here. And as we learned during the APEC year, there'll be a lot of ministerial meetings. So potential for a lot of engagement between the U.S. and China. So question for you, how do you view this? Is this a sign that maybe there will be more stability, at least for one more year in the relationship?
Well, you hit on a great question, and your commentary around the question probably analyzed it fairly completely. It is the most important relationship, and it's the most dangerous, both economically and from a security point of view. I think the reality is that the macroeconomic forces are going to lead to a larger trade deficit for the U.S. than we've had maybe ever this year. So the current approach with tariffs and the like is not going to be seen as effective in driving the trade deficit down. I think the administration is very capable of shifting narratives and saying what other successes they achieved through this, even if it's just more exports, even as our trade deficit widens. I think it kind of depends on Trump's willingness to shift the narrative. I think we saw elements of that recently, that he, created a problem of his own making and declared a win when he, resolved his own problem, in that the chokehold over rare earths is a much more significant threat than limiting high-quality chips going to China that we have. So I think this imbalance of power at the present has been made clear to Trump, and I think he's likely going to respect that and change the narrative to make things work. He doesn't take things personally, so he says. It's all business, and I think there's a good chance that he will try to flip the narrative again with China for next year. And perhaps the fact that the U.S. is hosting G20 allows them to, again, meet as equals on the world stage and make compromises with each other that they're comfortable with politically.
Okay, over to the audience. If you have questions, raise your hand. Someone will bring you a microphone. Let's take a few questions at the same time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Wendy, for doing this. Mark Monnier with the South China Morning Post. This is directed at Danny. We saw on Tuesday that the political winds went against Trump a bit. Trump is a political animal, as we know. And some of the base is now talking about, why are you spending so much time overseas? Why aren't you worried about affordability for Americans, et cetera? And so I wonder what the implications are of that, both for, it was quite surprising for some that he even made it to Asia and to APEC. That looked kind of questionable. And then by extension, whether you might see a scenario where things deteriorate again with China because of the need for a scapegoat. Thanks.
Other questions?
Good morning. Thank you for sharing very insightful and profound opinions with us and taking my questions. I'm Seung-Ri, reporter of YT and News Channel of South Korea. I have two questions that goes to Mr. Danny Russel and Mr. Chul. First, President Donald Trump has declared that no one but the U.S. will possess NVIDIA, the private company's most advanced Blackwell GPUs. Will Korea's plan to secure 260,000 NVIDIA Blackwell GPUs jeopardized by President Trump's export restrictions? And Minister of National Defense of South Korea mentioned that it's not feasible for Korea to construct nuclear-powered submarines in the Philly shipyard in the U.S. due to insufficient capacity there. Will Korea be able to pursue construction of nuclear-powered submarines in Korea, not in the U.S., through consultation with the U.S.? And what are the prospects and timeline for revising the U.S. ROK nuclear cooperation agreement needed for nuclear material use? Also, I have one question for Mr. Richard Cantor.
No. You just asked two, so
Okay,
that's
sorry.
enough. Let's give someone else a chance, and then we'll turn to our panelists.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your time. I think I prefaced my question by saying I have a deeply vested interest in the US, Europe, and Asia's ability to do business together and to find common ground. But my question is, does the US actually really have an interest in Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific? I actually contend that I'm not sure they do. And so my question to you is, do you think they do have an actual interest?
Okay, so we've got a number of questions here. Danny, a couple were directed at you, including, the president going abroad. What does that mean? Or is he going to be more domestically focused going ahead? One on Blackwell chips, nuclear submarines, and now just kind of that more general question. But why don't you address what you can, and then we'll turn to Chul and to Richard.
Well, great and tough questions. There's no question that the economy was, and always will be an important factor in presidential decisions about foreign policy, about foreign travel, et cetera. And some of this is governed by the calendar, particularly the fact that 2026 is a midterm election. Midterm elections are not friendly to presidents in their, not technically first term, but in effect first term. And so I think that, as Richard alluded to, the president will be looking to see what actions and what narratives are helpful to him or are even viable politically. That said, there are other issues besides the economy that the president believes bolster his strength. Immigration is one, and so we're seeing a lot of very aggressive military moves aimed at South America, Central America, drug trafficking, et cetera. So there's clearly a mix of elements in a calculation. Some of them are political and some of them are, in fact, economic.
I can just mention, every 4 years, typically the APEC leaders meeting, with the exception of this year, is in November. And the way I always remember, it's generally like within a week or so of our election, which always makes a lot of uncertainty about whether the president's going to, participate or not.
Right. Although 2028 feels like a long way away.
No, but even the midterm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes they don't want to leave after the election.
Okay. I think it's hard for me to imagine that President Trump will not go to Shenzhen for a variety of reasons. But it is certainly the case, as you said, that the quote unquote deal, the whatever agreement was reached, the truce in Busan is extremely fragile in terms of the US and China. It could be disrupted in any number of ways. And the underlying drivers of antagonism, friction, competition, confrontation between Washington and Beijing are untouched by any of the agreements or deals that may have been reached so far. As far as the restriction of Blackwell chips is concerned, stay tuned. I think that is in place until the next phone call from Jensen Huang to Donald Trump, which has been demonstrated to result in some significant shifts of policy. So we'll have to see.
So you don't think China's given up on its push either?
Well, I don't think China is necessarily going to welcome Blackwell chips any more than it welcomed the H-20s, because the Chinese determination is to free itself from the vulnerability of dependency and to create not only homegrown equivalent, but a Chinese-centered system that serves their interests. The nuclear sub construction, there are no shipyards in the United States, and the shipyard in Pennsylvania that the president has pointed to has never built a single sub ever. But there is just not nearly enough capacity in U.S. naval shipyards to build the submarines that were committed to for Australia under AUKUS, let alone new ones for Korea. So if in fact this idea ever goes anywhere, which is in some question, I think, yeah, the subs would have to be built in Korea. And yes, there would be some amendments to agreements on the handling of nuclear material. But remember that although the president has been unclear about the difference between nuclear weapons and nuclear power, we're talking about nuclear powered submarines, not nuclear capable submarines.
We're going to need to, let me turn to Chul quickly, and then my understanding is Casey is wants to make some final comments. So any quick comments on chips and subs? Sounds like lunch.
Okay, I'm not gonna touch on the subs because the nuclear is too dangerous to an economist like me, so I'm not gonna touch on that. About the chips, I think the Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, actually it was a fascinating event. Actually, that there was
He was in Korea.
he was in Korea and he had a meeting with the Samsung chairman and the Hyundai Motors chairman in a place like the called the Ganbu Chicken, which is the chicken store. You see all over the world that the people eat chicken with beer, but in Korea we call it chimek, and which is the chicken together with the makju. Makju means beer, so it became a culture in Korea. And he knew that they had this chimek meeting among themselves, and then announced that later the providing 260,000 the GPU chips to Korea. But I think it showcased that the Korea's strength in the physical AI these days. Now physical AI becomes more important, right? So I think the Korea's capacity in the manufacturing and all the know-hows and the experiences. So that's why NVIDIA wants to collaborate with the Korean companies and declare that. So just one comment on the China hosting next year, APEC. As Danny mentioned that the China claims that they're going to be the champion of the rules-based trading system. Okay, they say that, but the key question is, can they build the trust among the members about their real the willingness to do that. I mean, you can talks, but the work is quite different. So I think that's a big challenge if the China wants to make some progress in terms of their priority areas.
So you need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Okay, with that, we're going to turn back to Casey Mace. Give us a second here.
Good, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, go easy on me, Casey.
No, I'm not going to react directly to you, Danny, but I did want to offer one other comment and thought as we're looking to the future. Something I failed to mention about AI and recognition of the importance of AI to both the U.S. economy and to the region, and the opportunities for the United States to grow its exports and services and goods in that area. The United States announced in the context of this APEC our intention to provide, working with Congress, $20 million to accelerate the adoption of American artificial intelligence technology and to foster a pro-innovation regulatory environment across the Asia-Pacific region. So this is a new initiative that will be leading out of the State Department to set up a series of workshops, regulatory workshops around the region that looks more closely at how to create the right regulatory environment for the adoption of AI, and also to work with the U.S. Trade Development Authority to do some feasibility studies for different markets, especially in Southeast Asia, where adopting AI can lead to real economic growth and opportunity for them. So we're really leaning into this. This is going to be an ongoing line of effort for us into the next year and the years following, because it represents such an important part of our engagement in the region. And I would note, so many of the U.S. technology companies were there at the APEC CEO Summit during Leaders Week. All of the U.S. tech companies, and made announcements on the investments they're making in the region. For example, Amazon announced that the investments they're making across the region represent something like $45 billion in contributions to the United States GDP. So these investments that our tech companies are making in the region are really important for the American economy, and the U.S. government and this administration is going to continue to partner with U.S. industry to grow those opportunities.
Thanks, Casey, for that update. I think that's extremely important. And I think it just underscores that when we talk about America's commitment to the region, it's not just the administration or the government, it's also our private sector. And I think that's extremely important. Is Casey, are you still listening? Okay, yes, I was going to ask him, when is China's first APEC meeting going to be? Do you have any idea, Chul? Have they announced it?
The first APEC meeting is Som-1, usually in February. But before that, usually we have the ISOM, informal SOM, in December. So I think there's going to be informal SOM in December
11th.
Right.
Oh, it has been scheduled.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, I hope Casey and the other senior officials can get some rest in between now and when the next year starts, because again, it's a year process. And even though we just typically at a high level focus on that last week, it's a very, what can be a very robust and demanding year. With that, please join me in thanking our panelists, Ambassador Kang, Casey, Mace, for this interesting discussion. And thank you for joining us this morning at the Asia Society. We appreciate it.